Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now. Just a second, hang on. I've done something bizarre. Oh, never mind. I can see people. Everyone's sort of in a little line at the top of the screen, and then you're sort of huge,
All right.
beaming down.
I like to make an impact, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. How's life? How's
All right,
business?
getting my stuff together.
Mm,
Oh, busy.
mm,
It's good, but I must admit this CPO is war. These people are not nice.
no.
It's been very, very stressful, to say the least. You know, we kind of you're dealing in a really stressful environment now anyway with COVID. So that's causing, you know, massive problems and implications, everything that you do. And then you're dealing with a group of people that are just hell bent on getting you for nothing. And funny, I've been sitting here doing a power project for the last sort of hour or two, actually, and trying to outline sort of what it's like. I read that document. Oh my goodness, Damien White.
Just say nothing. Yeah. So yeah.
I mean, the kid needs to get a job. He needs to work in a business. He needs to understand. I know he's a figurehead. He's not the person behind it all. He's just a figurehead, but oh, it's dangerous. Anyway, I did actually I did put on one of my slides, rant, rage and ramble on. I'm not going to do it.
It's a good drop for tradition, though, isn't it? So
Yeah.
Why break the habits of a lifetime?
Yeah, I'm going to really try not to.
That's what I do. Oh, look, there's lots more of us now.
Yeah, we're all getting
Hello,
it.
Ray. We can't hear him.
Andrew.
Oh, Jodie. Hello, Jodie.
Hi,
Just sharing.
how are you?
Yeah.
She's sharing Andrew for us.
My goodness.
There's John.
Yeah.
Hiya.
Afternoon, John.
Hi there.
You've got the
Just
same
went-
haircut as me.
Oh,
And you've been copying
Hi, Ray.
my haircut, John.
I think Julia's been to the hairdressers.
Yeah, I did.
Very nice.
I'm back to blonde.
We would, but we haven't got enough.
Yeah.
You know, my hair's now growing at such a ridiculous rate. I can't do very much with it. It goes in a ponytail, as I'm sure Jodie will do the same thing. It just goes right up.
Can I just say before we start, Time FM have been in touch and said, could I send a press statement from today? Because we always pick times when they're fully busy on the news items. What can I say? The recorder's supposed to be joining us, but they said if we could send a recording, Michael, who normally comes to these conferences, it's his day off.
Okay.
But Ross of the Haven Daily is on and listening. So we will get coverage after today. Perhaps we should pass it over to Jodie to start proceedings.
Thank you. So obviously, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jodie Ganley. I used to be ward councillor in Highlands. I'm still very much part of the Hornchurch Residents Association and still very active in Highlands Ward. Graham asked me to chair tonight's meeting because the guy who normally does is not very well. So I take it there's no apologies.
No, I think
everybody's here, which is great. So I know everybody that's here. I take it you all know each other as well. So I don't think there's any need for introductions. So if we number one on the agenda is John Cruddas, an update on the government mayoral and planning changes.
Great, thanks, Jodie. Shall I just kick off? Shall I?
Yes.
Basically, to remind everyone, the government unveiled plans to overhaul the planning system in August. I think we described it as a developer's charter. They plan to rip up the post-war planning rule book, dictate numbers in each area, binding targets, minimal local engagement, which was going to be plans would be railroaded through. We concluded that South Havering would become a dumping ground for Whitehall targets and undermine local democracy. We all agreed the Pleasant planning system is bad enough. This will make it much, much worse. And we said we were bringing together a coalition to oppose these terrible ideas locally. And I suppose my sort of report back is that the pressure is beginning to take effect. Just this last week, a housing algorithm for England has been dropped by the government after an outcry from its own MPs. The formula, which was labelled by one Tory MP a mutant algorithm, would have prioritised building in the southeast while reducing construction and new housing in the north, basically what the developers wanted. A debate in October, I think there was about 55 Conservative MPs who put their name down on the order paper to speak to criticise the proposals. Now, just on Wednesday, the government announced a U-turn, basically, saying its updated housing formula to enable the delivery of 300,000 homes a year by the mid-2020s would prioritise brownfield sites and urban areas. It said that it would encourage more homes to be built in England's 20 largest cities and urban centres. Plans include a £100 million brownfield land release fund to promote urban regeneration and development on public sector land. So basically what's happened is Tory MPs in the shires, in the rural communities and the towns in the southeast have kicked up. The problem is this could make it much worse for Havering, actually, because even than we initially thought, as the plan here is to protect the rural communities and villages, not suburbs like Havering, especially those with brownfield sites in the borough. These more than ever will take the strain. If you remember, the Royal Institute of British Architects predicted that the end of planning permission, which is included in these proposals, would lead to, quote, the next generation of slum housing. The climb down from Jenrick's earlier August proposals has been welcomed by many. It gets rid of this mutant algorithm, reputedly something that was in there because of the building lobby eager to boost their development land banks in the southeast. It's collapsed under a barrage of protest from southern rural Tory MPs that face being concreted over. Yet the Tories are still determined to strip local councils of planning powers, and any revised formula will put even more pressure on boroughs like ours. And this is in no way a victory for local democracy. So we've seen a lot of talk about climb downs this week, but in actual fact, I worry that it will make things even worse for us. Jenrick said he's going to bring some sanity into housing. He would do well to scrap the formula altogether, actually. Local people can best judge whether and where they want their communities to grow. He should worry less about the developers and look at the scandal of empty sites, under occupancy and housing vacancy. Sort of the luxury towers, many foreign owned, that now line the Thames in London are reportedly half empty. That would be a good start. He says that it takes on average 5 years for a standard housing development to go through the planning system. This is the developer's argument, actually, and it's actually not true. The BBC reality check could find only 5 big developments that have taken that long. I think 89% of major applications are decided within 13 weeks of the agreed time. And delay is usually caused by developers themselves going into lengthy appeals. So outside of certain rural protected areas, almost any building is still going to be permitted without so much as a planning permission. The Council for Preservation of Rural England claims land for as much as 1.3 million is lying idle, with permits already in place for more than 500,000 homes. So this is this really does not need to happen. Give example, the Tory MP Jeremy Hunt accused Jenrick of nothing less than undermining local democracy. I think we all agree local communities need to take back control. Despite what we've heard this week, the campaign continues. That's my sort of report back, Chair.
Okay, any questions on that from anybody?
No.
Andrew, Curtin?
Do you know anything more about this urban release fund? Any sort of criteria? And is it £100 million, you said?
100 million planned. There was also other smaller bits of money as well. No, this is being done on the spin, basically, because of the outcry by rural Tories. They decided before the Christmas they wanted to send a message back to them that we've listened to your concerns. We've got enough rebellions on, lockdowns and Brexit is still looming. So we need to park this problem with our backbenches to demonstrate that this is going to be based on urban regeneration sites. We're going to announce a new fund to help. So that sort of sweetens the political pill, really. So we'll chase up on the details in the new year, Andrew. But, we'll see. I mean, to me, the real problem is I think the numbers will mean that more will be stacked up in terms of Havering. And the reality is that the democratic argument is still the priority, in the sense that this will put a coach and horses through already the planning system that is full of holes anyway. We're now going to just undermine it totally, as far as I can see. So I would imagine more changes are still to come in the new year, because this won't be enough to satisfy everyone. And we need to keep up the pressure. That's all I would say. And I'll find out more details and report back on the Regeneration Fund.
Okay, thanks, John. I've got Julia and then Ray.
First of all, I have a question for John. In respect of what you've just spoken about, and the land that they're talking about, the brownfield land, which we know is the land that we're presently sitting on, have they indicated how they're acquiring this land?
No, I didn't pick up anything about that this week.
I really think, John, it's something that you should bring up, because they're making these assumptions that they are going to be able to acquire this land. I would very much suspect that most of it is going to be compulsory purchased, especially if it's brownfield, because that's usually land owned by people. It's not like land that's just derelict. It's owned. It may not be occupied, and the reason it may not be occupied is, and something we've experienced here ourselves, is that the councils have an ability to hide their abilities to stop businesses trading.
Right.
And we have discovered and uncovered that in Bridge Close. So I really think one of the questions that you could put to Cabinet when you have got an opportunity is to find out how they are acquiring this brownfield land. So, right, that was my question.
I mean, to reinforce the point I was trying to make, that is, I don't think anything changes regarding Havering and these planning changes that have unleashed in August. There's a lot of song and dance about having listened to people's concerns, but I don't think anything changes in terms of our initial discussion. So similarly, your concerns about the acquisition of land are still as appropriate today as they were before, the announcements in the last couple of days. I don't think alter it. And in actual fact, I would say they make things worse, because they intensify the need to build as many as possible on brownfield land across Havering.
One of the things that I don't think it comes across enough if it reaches newspapers or it reaches the radio or in discussions, what doesn't come across is where this land is coming from. And it's only a small minority of the country, because Britain is, I believe, the only country that does do land acquisition by CPO. Or maybe America does too, but I don't think there's too many. Now, the problem is not so many people are caught in this net. And it's not until you are caught in the net do you understand what it means. There's been a few programs on television about compulsory purchase, but if you were able to link this new, new legislation that is being planned to be brought in with compulsory purchase, I think you might actually reach a group of people that you are otherwise not going to reach. And I do genuinely believe that the way forward is people power. You will not be able to do this without people power.
Yeah.
That's what creates.
I take your point. I mean, it's not something that I've looked at as much as I should have done, actually, but I will do. Not least having listened to you for the last couple of meetings we've had on this. But I do take the point about the people. I think we will see further changes to this in the new year, because I don't think it's sustainable. Because of the local democracy issues, notwithstanding what they announced this week.
Okay, thanks, John. I've got Ray and then Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Jodie. Before I ask my question, I was going to just add on to what Julia was saying. I think one of the problems is that, and we've seen this in Havering, they've made a lot of assumptions in terms of what they will get from land values once properties that have been built on them are sold. And of course, with Waits, for example, we went into partnership with them because, as we were told, we were sharing the risk. Now, of course, since that time, Waits have decided to put some of that risk back on Havering Council. Now, as you know, John, there's been a lot of talk and concerns about councils getting involved with commercial developments of one sort or another. And this is to some degree, albeit it's not a shopping centre or something like that, but there's a considerable amount of risk as well. And I suspect that people like Waits have already sort of looked in the future and decided what the assumptions were in terms of house prices and what we will return may not be anything like what we had expected. So I think the financial side of things is another issue here, which is probably why in many cases any CPO offer is going to be less generous, because they know looking forward that they cannot be generous and adequate to what the businesses need, because they know that potentially they've got a deficit waiting a few years down the line. So there is that particular problem. In terms of brownfield sites, I think within London there's, and I don't know this, and maybe you do, John, but they do cite there's loads of TfL land that could be suitable for redevelopment, and even some former hospital sites. And one of the former hospital sites we'll no doubt talk about
Absolutely.
later on the agenda. The question was, though, is our own MPs in Havering, Julia and Andrew, have they kicked up anything? Have they asked questions or anything?
They haven't to date.
So interestingly enough, Andrew Rosendahl is very keen on having a petition, which he seems to be sponsoring along with Damien, on the Seedbed Centre.
Right.
But hey, why is he not kicking up a fuss in Parliament that we're having all this extra development potentially coming our way?
I'll leave that question in the air, I think,
Yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
I mean,
I think we know the answer, John. I was just putting it out there.
but I think you've touched on a really important point. Even since we've started our discussions here, is the whole business model is changing because of the effects of COVID, the unpredictability in the sector, the decline in revenues, anticipating more people living and working from home rather than some of the more urban settings. It is arguably changing some of the assumptions upon which a lot of speculation was built. You've also seen some perilous local government finances and the chickens coming home to roost in some authorities, where they have betted the ranch on some sort of partnerships or new ventures with certain developers or investment strategies. Croydon is the obvious one, but there are a host of others where there are challenging economics. Barking and Dagenham has its own challenging issues. All local authorities do, not least because the amount that they've spent on emergency COVID activities. So it's a changing environment within which all these debates have taken place, which should make us slightly more risk averse, I think.
The problem is, John, is that Havering Council, for example, is predicating a lot of their future income on the successful outcome of a number of these joint ventures. And if they don't materialise, we could be in a bit of a problem, because we do not have the finances now to back us up. Our reserves have effectively been wiped out.
Right.
Although we've got, what's it, something like £49 million in earmarked reserves, if we're going to start dipping into those monies that are going to be used in order to improve our efficiency in the future, it's not going to happen.
Which I think comes back to the unwillingness of some MPs to criticise the government in this area, because the housing developers are key supporters of politics. I'll say no more than that at the moment. And actually, especially if your authority will need more financial support from the centre, what you don't want to do is just be kicking off on over every issue, you know. So I don't think they've decided. I think they've decided that this is not one for them. This argument around housing development. My fear is that, sorry, just to repeat myself, my fear is those people who are kicking off, the government is responding to in the shires and the villages of the southeast, but that's making it even worse for us. We're becoming more of a target in terms of taking the strain, in terms of their agenda in terms of helping the developers.
And that's because Havering Council hasn't kicked back for a number of years in what we're being basically put upon, and there's no kickback from the local authority because they're actually encouraging it.
Absolutely. And the seabed, the petition was more a reaction to a wider coalition being built, and they realised that they're going to have to sort of have their own sort of agenda in this place as a reaction to what we've been trying to do, I think.
But I think, as Andrew has previously pointed out, their own Waterloo estate has got far greater density, less green space than the seabed centre. So, and I have to say honest with you, when I saw Damien's petition at full council on Wednesday against the seabed centre, I did think, what hypocrisy.
Well, Andrew puts this very well. Andrew Curtin, rather than Andrew Rose, puts this very well. The sort of the consistency across these arguments.
Indeed.
Okay, Graham, you wanted to come in?
I'll be very quick, otherwise we'll be here all night. Plenty of contributions to come. All I have to say, there's lots we could say, won't do it now. Julia is basically a victim of collateral damage of the rush to develop by the council, because developers, private developers, sweeten landowners with money. Havering Council can't, and therefore it has to undervalue and therefore underpay to make its little profit. I believe the council originally probably went into it in order to get a piece of the action. You know, all this development, why don't we do it? Why don't we become a developer? But unfortunately, it hasn't seemed to have worked out that way for various reasons. We're not qualified, we're not experienced in that very rapacious market. And I think we've been found wanting. And unfortunately, the black swan of COVID has come along at the wrong time for the council, and it's undermining everything. But I feel for our stakeholders like Julia, whether Julia lives in Havering or not, which I know she does, they're suffering. And I think in her contribution later, she's talking about the impact of all that genocide, if you like, of businesses in potential genocide of businesses in Havering. Where's it going to lead? But I'll say no more. I think we need to move on because I know Julia's got to leave soon anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Jodie.
That's okay. No, I was just going to say, so we're going to move agenda item number 4 up to number 2, because obviously you have got to leave early, Julia. So please continue.
Thank you. Very quickly, the reason I have to leave early this evening is the Bridge Close Business Alliance are meeting tonight, and it was the only evening that we could all get together before you know, the Christmas break, if you like. We're always worried around about this time because it's usually the time that Havering Council would take the opportunity to bombard us with CPO matters. In fact, I have had a number of emails, but I must admit I've not bothered worrying myself this week about them because I genuinely do just have to get on with running a business. So I'm going to just quickly touch on, I've got 5 slides. I'm going to fly through them because you know, I know everybody's got stuff to do. I thought I'd introduce myself and what we are and what we do, because I'm not sure that I actually did that properly before. So industrial land users. So I'm going to look away from there because I'm reading it on my screen because I didn't get it over right. Industrial land users, who we are and what we do. We are well-established family-run businesses who have worked from Bridge Close, Romford, for over 40 years. We combined can provide all the services you need to survive a pandemic, because we are local people providing local jobs. Combined, we supply specialist services and solutions for our local schools, hospitals, medical centres, public buildings, restaurants, supermarkets and homes. We are heating, ventilating, air conditioning engineers. We are lift engineers. We are joiners. We are design and manufacturers of plastics. We are catering services. We are relationship counselling. There were many more businesses, but they've been driven from the industrial land to other boroughs. And I should emphasise other boroughs. That's losing revenue and work in Havering, Romford, to make way for these homes. This is an unsustainable loss, which it is an unsustainable loss. So as I said earlier, rant, rage and ramble on. So my name is Julia Herald, as you all know. The firm is AC Prue Limited, who are mechanical engineers who have been in the shadow of compulsory purchase since 2015. But the story started way back in 2006, when a local developer and strategic planning department earmarked the benefits of allowing the loss of employment. Again, I must stress, the URS land review is a land review into employment, and if it's feasible to let that employment go. Well, apparently we are cannon fodder, as you like to put it. Just quickly about developers and local authorities. Developers are driven very much by money, and they will hold on to their money. And I do believe this is one of the reasons why the joint venture partnership with First Base has failed. I think the developers were not able to get what they needed in finances from this site quick enough to make it financially viable. And I believe that I'm right in what I've said, because I do know there are still companies down here in Bridge Close that haven't been paid fees for their consultants. So that was an add-in I've just stuck there. Anyway, it's easy to fall into a rambling rant and rage on how we are being treated so unfairly. But we want to turn this destruction into construction. However, having read only the first few pages of the Havering Inclusive Growth Strategy, it seems we are fighting a lost cause. The first 8 pages of this document are pure rubbish, concocted by a biased group of people. We are the businesses at the butt end of a regeneration projects. The way we are being treated does not show any parallel to anything that I've read in them first few pages of that document. So what can we do? We believe expose the truths lying behind the regeneration projects. Greed, greed, greed. We believe if enough local people are made aware of our plight, and I'm not just talking about us in Bridge Close, I'm talking about all brownfield sites, because I know there are lots of other people that are affected by this. Richard from Rainham Still, for instance, stepped in to come into this group, and I'm sure he's finding it very stressful right now with what he's got going on. So if we stood any chance of staying in Romford, it's the only way is by exposure. Today I want to give you a very brief idea of what it's like for us, but first we must consider the following. And this is really important, because this is something that Mr. White talks about, but he actually knows nothing about as far as I'm concerned. Diversity in town life is key. If you don't have a school, you can't teach the children. If you don't have a hospital, you can't heal the people. If you don't have homes, you can't accommodate the people. If you don't have shops, you can't feed the people. But if you don't have industry and services, the people and local authorities can't pay the people to teach, heal, accommodate and feed. Diversity is key to all village, town and city communities, for without people, there is no need for them. Now, I really think that's something that we really need to think about, because if you don't have a diverse community of businesses and people, services and suppliers, you will have terrible problems like you've got now in the City of London, which thrived only on the city. Now you've got businesses falling apart left, right and centre up there right now. Had it been a diverse community with industry still wrapped within it, it might not be in the situation that it is now, because people could still potentially go to work. COVID-19 has shown us that we do need more space. And this, what we've got coming towards us, what we're talking about in Preserve, is obviously going to take that away. So compulsory purchase, so previously, as I've talked about, compulsory purchase, very effective tool for local authorities. CPO is very effective tool enabling overdevelopment. It's an effective tool enabling communities apparently to connect. Very effective tool which can be used for the wrong reasons. The CPO is a very effective tool that needs new legislation to ensure the power of the tool to enable a democratic approach to the development, which is what you're talking about, John, when you go to Parliament. It's about not just one group of people going forward and saying, this is what we're going to do. We've got 4 years in term and this is what we plan to make of them 4 years. It needs to be far more democratic than that. So now I'm going to quickly, just 2 more slides, a snapshot of what it's like to run a business in Havering when housing is king. Firstly, the London Borough of Havering Shaping Growth and Delivery opportunity paper opening pages are pure rubbish. As a long-established Romford business, established in 1961, these last 5 years have been horrific from the consequences of the land grab that we're experiencing. There will be a loss of business community, loss of specialist industrial workers, loss of businesses to other boroughs, loss of businesses unable to take the strain of compulsory purchase. We have many people down here who are suffering serious illnesses. One of them is actually currently out of the country having heart treatment. You know, this is real stuff that we go through. We are an owner-occupier of our businesses, and all of the businesses that are remaining now in Bridge Close, that's what we are, which is why we do not find it attractive to be moved to the much publicised Rainham employment area. We have all we need here in this borough, which offers great rail links, great road links and shopping facilities for our staff. We do not wish to move from our owned properties to rented accommodation, which is what is being pressed on us. COVID-19 has shown us one thing. It's shown us if you own your own property, you have a chance of surviving a pandemic. If you don't, you then are at the mercy of those that own those properties. So there is no way that any one of the businesses that are down here now wish to go into rented properties, which is what is being forced upon us. We are threatened. We are kept in the dark. We are being offered £140 per square foot for properties, but cannot buy anything for less than 300 to stay in Romford. And that's if we can even get them now, because they are disappearing very fast because the developers are buying them all. And of course, we all know the developers have the money to buy little plots of land here and there. They don't need CPO to do that, which is why they don't then go into business with local authorities. We are not financially supported by the joint ventures. We are constantly having to chase them for negotiations. I've recently been told apparently they've just started negotiating with me again after not negotiating with me. I was a bit confused because we never stopped negotiating with them. They just didn't talk to us. We are bamboozled by professionals and have to employ our own to ensure we are treated fairly. I've had to employ a solicitor to deal with the London Borough of Havering recently. I won't go into the depths of it. I have touched on it with Graham. You wouldn't believe what we've had to deal with in this last year. I mean, not just COVID, but this other stuff. We are being bullied. We are being bullied into giving up our land and ultimately, in some cases, our businesses. Because if we can't get the right price per square foot, then we just cannot survive. So that's a rundown of what we are. I know Graham wanted me to touch on the document that I'd seen. But as I said, I read the first 8 pages and it was pure rubbish. I've got too much that I have to deal with Havering for me to have read the other 50 pages. There's so much going on behind the scenes that we as businesses have to try to preempt to survive. It's appalling in the present state that we're in right now with COVID-19. It's just completely wrong. So I probably haven't touched on all the things that I know that wanted to be touched on tonight, but I did want to put it sort of in a nice package. I've got it on a Power project, so if anybody, if you did want it, I can share it. I'm quite happy to do that and quite happy to take any questions. Thank you. And Merry Christmas.
So has anybody got any questions for Julie?
Hi, Ray.
Ray?
Yeah, I think we lost Jodie there for a second there.
Right.
It's more of a comment than questions, really. Yeah, Graham and I had the privilege, if that's the right word, probably not, of actually sitting on the overview and scrutiny board when we looked at the inclusive growth strategy. In fact, there's 150 pages of it. And I think even they admitted on the night ground, didn't they, that a lot of the data on which they were predicating their plans for the future was out of date. And we were saying, in which case then, should you not be pausing? Should you not be rethinking? But of course, the idea is, no, just push it all through and get it all done, approved and stuff. So it's just about getting things done, not necessarily getting the right things done. You're right, there were so many questions. In fact, I had considerable number of categories where they were just, things like, where are your priorities, where are your targets, where's your evidence, details on demand, where's your data, how are you going to measure achievement? There's a whole list of different things that I picked up, and it appeared to us that they really hadn't considered a lot of it. It's just, we've got to get this document done, let's get it passed by cabinet and let's just get on. But as a strategic document, it didn't really seem to be the most cohesive. I guess the bullying bit seems to be a constant thing that we're hearing out of Havering Council, whether it be staff, businesses, residents, you name it, we've heard about it. But I guess finally, as a strategic approach, we perhaps do need to get as many businesses together, and perhaps this is where you come in, Graham, more in terms of getting the press involved, in terms of telling people this is what is happening in your borough. We've got an administration that clearly wants to overdevelop the borough. It's not interested about how it's going to look in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time. Let's just get it done now. And perhaps one of the things I'll come back later on in relation to the St George's site is where you can do things slightly differently.
Graham?
Very quickly again, time. Yes, very good point that Julia makes about diversity of use. And it seems ironic that in the council's strategic growth plan, it says there is a danger that we could become a dormitory borough. Well, I would suggest the council is looking at a self-fulfilling prophecy, that all their plans and their actions are feeding into us becoming a dormitory borough. In other words, many more people live in Havering, very few jobs, or less jobs than now, very little infrastructure support, so we'll have to commute out. We'll become basically St Albans on Thames. And that's a great worry for anybody that's living in Havering, let alone anybody moving to Havering. So thank you for that, Julia. And it's something we need to take up, and we need to get ahead of the curve by telling the media and the public that there's a danger of that happening to Havering. And John is correct when he says that Havering, I'll come on to that very briefly later, Havering actually probably won't avoid being overdeveloped, regardless of it going to the Midlands and other areas that the government's talking about, because I think they've already decided Havering is one area we want to dump on, but we'll come back to that. Thank you.
Okay, and Andrew, you wanted to come in?
Who's council cabinet member for this inclusive development strategy, or whatever it is?
What the inclusive growth strategy? It's our friend Damien.
Oh, Damien.
It comes under economic development, which is one of his overall portfolio.
A specialism of his, is it? Oh, okay.
Sorry?
A specialism of his, is it, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's got considerable experience in economic development, because he's developed his economy very, very well personally.
Yeah.
So from nothing to 60 grand a year.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to clarify who it was.
That's okay.
So anybody else got any more questions for Julia? No. Okay, Julia, thank you very much for that. Thank you. So we move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is how to develop or not, and studies from St George's site, and that's Councillor Williamson and Councillor Morgan, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just do a little brief introduction before we let Ray speak, because Ray was a ward councillor on the site, St George's site, and because of his involvement, in spite of the council, it actually turned out to be better development than it could have been, but we'll come back to that. In our last meeting, I explained that the root of overdevelopment in Havering is mayoral and government housing targets, and the lack of meaningful pushback from council to boot. Whilst proposed government planning laws have largely focused on making planning permissions easier, there's been less talk about actual housing numbers. John has talked about their proposed growth areas a couple of times before today, which are meant to take a lot of the new properties, and there's a debate whether Havering will have lots of growth areas or not. That's still to be decided. However, we now know that the government is proposing to revise the so-called standard method of calculating requisite housing targets. Thus, instead of our present 1,170 a year, which is only just going through in our local plan, this would increase, would you believe it, to 1,975, according to the government. So
just say the figures again, Graham. Sorry.
Right. At the moment, our local plan's going through.
Yeah.
Very soon, hopefully within a month or so, to 1,170 units per year. Our present plan is 554, but we've tended to ignore that anyway. Now, the government standard method, they're going to change the calculation, and that will be 1,975. Now, I've no idea whether the algorithm changes will affect that. I suspect not, but who knows? But certainly, as far as the government's concerned, Havering's the place to overdevelop. They wouldn't use that word, I'll use that word. But that's doubling what we're just about to agree to. That's very serious. And we're not talking about 1,975 a year. We're talking about every year. How they're going to achieve that is beyond me, but given the fact that 52% of our land's greenbelt. Are they going to change that? Or more likely, are they going to over-densify the brownfield so that it look like a very, very urban borough? But we'll come back to that. That, to be fair, that's higher than the mayor's. Even the mayor doesn't want as many as that, or didn't anyway. Now, this is likely to encourage developers to densify sites, as I've said, far greater than what we're seeing, even further than at present, to avoid building upon greenbelt or more protected areas. The mayor's pending local plan is removing density as a sole reason to object, and presently major development is expected to go into Havering's 2 housing zones. which I might add, we may live to regret. Thus, the initiative seems to have moved from council to developers. We're getting away with cutting corners on all manner of issues: density, affordable housing, heights, family homes, etc., or lack of. But it doesn't have to be that way, in my opinion. And the council could, if it had the will, to ensure that developments broadly fit with a local area's character, in other words, suburbia. One such development that may fit that bill, that could in fact be a model to some extent, and has frankly become an outlier to what's actually happening elsewhere, is the old St George's site. So I'd like to hand over the presentation to Councillor Morgan, in whose ward Hackton this site is in. Ray.
Yeah, before I just go move on to that, I was just going to also about to say, adding to what Graham was talking about the London plan. And actually, Robert Gendrick has been saying to Sadiq Khan that, yeah, thanks, you've done some of what we wanted you to do, but actually our housing target for London is going to be considerably higher than what you want to do. So obviously the Conservatives will say it's all Mayor Khan's fault for all this overdevelopment, but their own minister is actually saying, no, you're not doing enough, Sadiq, you need to do a lot more. So we need to bear in mind the London plan for the future. So going on to the St George's site, obviously, as you know, Bellway Homes acquired the site. I think they spent something like 42 million pound on it. So once I knew that Bellway had acquired the site, the first thing I did very rapidly was write to their directors and got a meeting set up to speak to them, which we did in the town hall. And my view was that, you know, they've spent 42 million pound on the site, they're going to develop it. So what can we do locally to help shape it? Because what we didn't want is an overdevelopment of the site. So we set out our stall. We made it very clear that if they wanted our support, we didn't want a pile it high, sell it cheap type of development. We wanted a quality development with the retention of plenty of green space, which is helped by the fact that some of the site is metropolitan green belt, so it's only really the footprint that can be built upon. And I guess we were persuading them by saying, look, if you do a build it high, sell it cheap, high density, you will not get the prices that you want because it won't be attractive to people. They won't want to come there. And in the end, you'll get negative returns. If you do a good quality, well-designed site with lots of green space, don't overdevelop it, you will get the prices because people will be attracted to the site because it is an attractive site. It's right by Hornchurch Country Park. You've got Hornchurch Tube Station, about 10 minutes walk up the road. It's a good place to be. And in fairness to Bellway, they have listened to that. And in fact, the density on the site is considerably lower than what they could have got away with if they really wanted to. However, what they have found, is what I told them would be the case, is the prices they are getting on the site is considerably higher than even I thought they would probably get. You know, we're talking about 2-bedroom properties now going up for about £575,000. It's a lot of money. And on top of that, people are obviously having to pay quite a large amount of maintenance charge each year. But people are moving in, people are signing up to buying all that. So we made it clear that this is, if they wanted our support, we would work with them. And yes, there was a lot of people locally who weren't very happy. They wanted it to be a hospital site again. But the bottom line is, we've had to persuade people, look, it's not going to be a hospital. The NHS have decided it's surplus land. They don't want it. It's been bought. So let's try and shape things so that we get as good a development as we possibly can. The height is all reasonable, nothing more higher than 4 stories. And even some of that is, although it's 4 stories, because of the contour of the land at St George's, it actually dips away, so it only really looks like 3 stories. There's plenty of green, obviously with another hat on, obviously, and part of the Section 106 agreement, we've got the RAF Hornchurch Heritage Centre that's going next door. in the former Sutton's House, which will be a great thing for the borough to preserve some of our history, because obviously our Reformed church is a very historic site. As I say, the height's brilliant. It's done in such a way that it tries to retain a lot of the character of the site. It's not going to be exact, because when you're taking buildings down that frankly have been in situ since I think about 1931, something like that, you're not going to get it exactly matching, but we sort of try to emphasise to try and keep the unique character of the site, which they have done as best you can when you're building something new, because we didn't want the character of the area dramatically changed, as we've seen in the middle of Romford. We're building a sort of tower blocks with probably very little sort of character. And I guess, we've carried on working with them. In fact, I was talking to Bellway today because they got a couple of planning conditions that they need to discharge. And I was having a discussion with them to see how we could help them sort of discharge. So we worked with them all the way along over the past few years. And I think actually it's paid dividends. I'm not so sure that necessarily on other major sites there's been that level of award engagement, hence why some of the developments that have been coming along is probably not really what we want in the borough.
Okay, thanks, Ray. Julia, did you want to go? Because I know that you're conscious of time because you've got another meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Jodie. Yeah, I do want to go. I've just got one question.
Yeah, sure.
When Graham was talking about how many units were planned per year, 1,975, I just wondered, is there a review period for that? So if they're planning on putting, giving us 1,975 units per year, how long is that going to go on for? Is it a program of 10 years? And is there a review period in it where it maybe can go up or come down?
Graham?
Yeah. It's unlimited in terms of the time. Indefinite is a better word to use. I mean, who knows? The problem is that the London plan, the local plan, the MPPF, the government's plans are all out of sync. They're all different dates. It's very, very confusing. This would be coming with the new planning laws, which John can look into. The new planning laws are focused, as I said earlier, mainly on permissions for developers to make it easy for them.
Yeah.
But underneath it, what we suspected, but the government didn't announce it, is housing targets as well.
Right.
What I've said is correct. 1975. Who knows where that could go? If you're going to, the government want 300,000 a year in the country. Now, the reality is it's an uncomfortable conversation for some people. It's population changes. As our population keeps rising, and most of it's migration, some births, some change of way we live, that's fair enough. But because we increasing 300,000 a year, put Brexit to one side, you're going to have to build more properties. And unfortunately, nobody's talking about that connection. So I can't say, Julia, what will happen. The planning laws are not in yet. John will probably know before any of us whether there would be a review. But I suspect it's a government diktat, and they're saying we want 975. We might want 2,500 in a few years' time to meet their targets. Yeah. And we are little people that don't seem to have any say in it at all. And John himself would probably admit that he's only a fly on that elephant of the government, and we're even less. So, I don't want to give you bad news, Julie, because I do.
No, yeah, it's
people power is all we've got.
Yeah.
And we need to be exposing this issue. I think Ray wants to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and just say one of the things that we haven't really mentioned this evening is about infrastructure, which is something that we always talk about at the joint venture working party that Graham and I are on, but we never ever seem to get a satisfactory answer. And we know that we are hundreds of thousands of pounds short in terms of funding to provide this infrastructure, but also not only the infrastructure, but it's also personnel So if you're going to increase your population with all the housing, you're going to have to increase the number of GPs, the number of doctors, nurses, teachers, police, all those public services that are relied upon, which of course you need greater numbers every time you increase your population by a reasonable amount. We never hear anything at our JV working party meeting that anybody within the council is having those kind of conversations. And as a result, I think we all know that the quality of life that we're going to be having, and Graham and I and Jodie will be able to say this, that in recent years, increasing numbers of people complain about it takes them weeks to get an appointment at the GP. You probably hear that from your constituents as well, John. And that's only going to get worse if we don't start planning, because with doctors, what is it, 7 years to train a doctor? If we're building the houses now, but we're not even thinking about training doctors for them to come along in 7 years' time, we've got a problem. So the infrastructure side of things is the bit that's really the concerning bit, because it's not really going along. They don't, you know, in that inclusive growth strategy, when we asked about infrastructure, and they really didn't say a lot about it, because really it's not, it's the afterthought. But we need to start planning that bit of it now, because it shouldn't be the afterthought. It should be part and parcel. And again, nobody ever talks about it.
I think the reason is, Ray, sorry to interrupt, I think John wants to speak. Just one point. The reason is, as you know, the SIL which the developers, and Andrew, the SIL which the developers pay, the levy towards infrastructure, is 65% short. Graham Williamson invention, even the council admit that. And that's including mayoral and TFL, etc. contributions. And when you ask, well, where's the other 65% coming from? A look at the feet, a shrug of the shoulders. So the reason, in my opinion, they don't talk about infrastructure because there's money for it. So they just want to just pretend it's not a problem. Sorry. Over to
So Julia, and then I've got Andrew.
I'm going to have to go. So lovely to see you all this evening. Hopefully next time I meet you, I will have got myself a bit more together and have a bit more time to prepare for, you know, the actual, you know, preserve itself instead of for the businesses in Bridge Close. All right, all keep safe. Have a great Christmas, and I'll see you in the new year.
Cheers, Julia.
Did you not leave us any virtual mince pies then?
I wish I could. Oh, hang on. Oh, no, I've thrown it away.
So I've got Andrew, and then I've got John next.
I'm just going to suggest, no, obviously, Damien White's people control the relevant Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But is there still a health or social care Overview and Scrutiny Committee? I mean, it might be worth, we'll let them turn down an investigation into why their cabinet member is not seeking to coordinate that. But surely they should have the relevant cabinet member there and start discussing with them the issues, because that's what the cabinet member's paid for.
No.
I've got John.
Don't expect. No, you're out of touch, Andrew.
Yeah.
This is not the cabinet that you and I were in, where you had to work for your money.
No, it's to pay for leave. That's why they're there. But you know, whatever.
I mean, Ray spoke very well about the infrastructural question, and this is where the general climate kicks in terms of the post-COVID climate of paying the bills is really going to kick in. So we are going to likely have massively escalating populations and another decade of austerity and contraction around it. And that, you know, that is the real, and people will see that. And they will see, just look at primary care facilities in South Havering and Rainham at the moment, and the pressure they're under through retirements, through closures, through literally death. Dr. Abdullah in Rainham died 2 weeks ago from COVID. And there's real pressures on the primary care. Police numbers, you know, we've seen the government is saying they're going to put more police on the streets. Last night, the Treasurer Rishi Sunak was talking about. He wants debt levels to go back to 3% of GDP. I think they're going to be about 18% this year after the COVID thing. Think about that level of financial contraction and what that means in support for public services and support for councils over the next years. And this is not going to be, you know, this is not an on-off switch you're sorted out in 1 year. This is going to be year on year on year. And it's a really malign environment within which the brownfield land is going to be taking the strain in terms of the stacking up the housing numbers nationally. And that's where the rubber is really going to hit the road, I'm afraid. So, it's, you know, I can't see any way out of that in terms of the public service contraction in the future.
Okay. Anybody else got any more questions for Graham or Ray?
I was just going to say, just commented on you, John, is that you're absolutely right. The debt problem, in fact, Graham will tell you, last year or this year's budget meeting, I said exactly about the sort of debt levels are going to be a problem. That was even before COVID.
Right.
And I think I identified COVID as the black swan. Well, that turned out to be a correct call as well. And what the council are going to be doing is they're going to be secretly running down a lot of services, and we've heard some of it already, thinking that they'll get away with saying everything's okay, it's normal and all that, but secretly under the surface, just getting rid of them. And some that in their budget report back at November cabinet, there was a lot of big numbers, but didn't seem to be any detail whatsoever as to how they were going to achieve those big numbers. So I don't know how they intend to do it without significant changes in services. So that will just add on top of what we've already got.
Okay, so I've got item agenda number 4, which is Andrew, the future of Romford Town Centre.
Okay, so I'll pick up on some of the themes we've discussed previously and just flesh them out a bit more. So obviously, just to restate again, Romford Society deals with the environment. That's our focus. So we're extremely concerned that serious action is not being taken. So Ray took serious action in Hackton around development there, but that isn't happening in central Romford to improve the environment of central Romford in the future. And that extreme concern spreads over a wide range of areas of interest. So firstly, we talk about live planning applications. Romford councillors are proposing schemes with insufficient space in them, but opposing those which do make provision for significant new areas of public space. So to return to Wolseley Road again, Romford councillors are proposing a 1,400 flat scheme, which has barely half the children's play space which planning policy requires in it. While at the same time, they've launched as we said, a hysterical, in both senses of the word, a campaign against the smaller development on the Seabed Centre, which is 55% new green space, including the renaturalisation of the River Ron. So their attitude is incomprehensible, but it's extremely dangerous to the environment of the future of the town, as the spaces between buildings are as important as the buildings themselves in giving a sense of order and proportion to the environment of the town. Lots of things crammed together with no sort of proportion between them look overbearing. So the Romford councillors are proposing the Wolseley Road scheme with inadequate space, but opposing the Seabed Centre with significant amounts of space is incredible. Secondly, Romford councillors are opposing internationally significant architects who are renowned for their work in blending spaces and places, and they're opposing them working in Romford. So let's go back to the Seabed Centre. The architects there are Patel Taylor. They're some of the nation's most significant architects and landscape designers. They're responsible for the Thames Barrier Park, among other things. And yet, instead of working with them on the development, as Ray did with Bellway, to mould the scheme, to push it forward, Romford councillors have launched this really boorish campaign against it, which is not only detrimental to the interest and quality of the future environment of the town, but it's actually also a rejection of a really key Romford tradition. Because since the early 18th century, when we had really great, so there was a great Georgian architect called Henry Flitcroft and a great Georgian landscape designer called Charles Bridgman, and they worked together at Bower House to try and do, obviously on a different scale, that same sort of link of landscape and buildings. And since then, that's been really central to the environment of Romford. culminating perhaps in that really great experiment at Romford Garden suburb in the early 20th century, when architects as significant as a guy called Clough Williams Ellis, who then went on to design Portmeirion, which is where the television programme The Prisoner was filmed in the 1960s. He worked at Romford Garden suburb. There's a really hugely significant modernist architect called Lubetkin, worked at Romford Garden suburb. So that's the whole tradition,
Right.
each time reinventing this in new circumstances. And Romford Council's attitude is both mystifying and damaging to the traditions of the town. But it's not just in buildings and spaces that Romford Council's attitudes are damaging to the environment of central Romford. To go back to this knee-jerk reaction they've had to the Seabed Centre, which is a bit like, I think in PR, they call it a dead cat moment. They've realised that people are, you know, fathoming out what they're doing on Waterloo Road, and they think, quick, distract people from it. And it's not going to work, you know. So in the Seabed Centre, they're opposing a plan which provides new natural areas to strengthen local nature corridors and prevent the town being a block on ecosystems and biodiversity, which it is at the moment. And mainly renaturalizes the waterway at the River Ron, which is always perhaps the most significant and powerful thing which can be done for nature in any area, is improve the waterways. And they're doing that at a time we know when nature is very vulnerable and needs our help more than ever. So why don't Romford councillors want Romford to be a green town? And why don't they do the hard work like Ray did at St George's Centre to improve something? Any plan can be improved, and any architect worth their salt is keen to work with people, but you do actually need to deal with them constructively. And finally, Romford councillors have an appallingly poor record on the historic environment of the town, which is an important part of the texture and the patina of the wider environment in general. So these are the people who wanted to put a building in front of the church in the market and 15th century church house, and that's in direct contravention of national planning policy. These are the people, and it is really a Romford council's responsibility, isn't it, to speak up for Romford. But these are the people who voted to knock down a protected building in North Street in Romford Conservation Area recently, and these are the people who took no action at all to protect the important and attractive 1930s Page Calnan building at the junction of South Street and the Ring Road recently. And that left us entirely at the mercy of the National Planning Inspectorate, because not unreasonably, when Romford councillors just put this on the shelf and left it, didn't take it to committee, where I suggest it probably would have been rejected, and not unreasonably, the applicants who we tried to deal with, and perhaps they were less open to negotiation, they took them to the inspectorate for non-determination, which is not unreasonable. Fortunately, the inspector came down on the right side and kicked out the proposal to demolish it. But shouldn't those decisions be taken locally? Why do we have to rely on someone from outside to do it for us? So, to sum up, we're hugely concerned about the future of the environment of central Romford, and we campaign for dramatic improvements in approach to try and make things better. That's it.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
Any questions for Andrew?
Can I ask a very obvious question, Andrew? Conservatism is about conserving the heritage, traditions, the architecture of the country. That is, you know, in its DNA. Why is this disregard for the traditions of conservatism, as I understand it? You know, that is the thing that I don't understand in this push me, pull you thing with the developers. I don't understand how they're not more robust in defending and conserving the town, the borough.
I think there are probably many people who would have the same question. It was once suggested to me, again, the Civic Society itself doesn't get involved. We will work with any mainstream political organisation who are interested. But it was once suggested to me that in Romford we don't have a Conservative Party, we have a cult of personality.
Yeah.
I guess the other problem is, John, is that Damien very clearly wants to cultivate people further up the chain. He wants to become an MP. Everybody, it's brutally obvious, as you know, that's what he wants to become. He wants to wants to do that, and if he needs to endear himself to people further up by allowing the overdevelopment of Havering, because that's what many of the government ministers want to do, he'll just do it, because he won't think about it. He's not interested in Havering, he's interested in himself. You know, if he can help himself, he'll do so. And generally speaking, and of course, Andrew and I come from a background of being part of Romford Tories, so we know how they work. This is a very different group of Conservative councillors than it was back in our day, Andrew, where the cabinet members, if you weren't on top of your game, you had Steve Kelly on top of you, put it that way.
It's a very interesting question, though, the changing character of conservatism locally, you know.
Yeah, so from that point of view, but nowadays, Damien runs the whole show. The cabinet members there are really bit part players, whereas you couldn't be a bit part player during the sort of Michael White, Steve Kelly reign, because frankly, your peers, including sort of Andrew and myself, would be on top of you. It's that the same dynamics don't work now.
But Andrew, just before you come in, could I just make a comment about, you said about the councillors, why were they not getting involved? And I'd just like to add to that comment that my time as councillor and what I've seen of the contacts, because I do live in Romford Town, the contact that I have had with the councillors on several occasions is I don't think half of them would know how to call in a planning application. If I was totally honest, and I have been to meetings with Conservative councillors where they've said that they don't know what to do, and it's well above their pay grade.
In fact, you can cite an example.
Yeah, totally.
of the mound.
Yeah. So I just think at the moment you've got probably a lot of councillors there that don't really know what's going on or don't know how to deal with it. So anyway, I think Graham was next.
Yeah, I think Andrew will come straight after me. I think the point John was making, and Ray, and Andrew hasn't commented, I think in effect, all parties, I mean national parties anyway, there's a conflict between ideology and self-interest. And I think now the Conservative group is all about self-interest, certainly from the top downwards. And therefore ideology is really an encumbrance that gets in the way of that self-interest. You're quite right, John, you would expect the Conservatives to want to conserve. But as Andrew has pointed out, who's much more knowledgeable than myself on Romford, I'll give you probably legion of examples of where architecturally or conserving a character is just out the window. It's secondary to their aim. So the shed, the so-called infamous shed, to be put in the conservation area, it would be an architectural nightmare. Totally goes against culture and conservation. But you have to understand what conservation is, wouldn't you? So you may join a Conservative party without understanding what that conservation's meant to mean. It means self-interest, I feel. The other bit, I'd like to thank Andrew for his contribution. And I'd like to think an alternative progressive administration would work closer with the civic society, the people who know what they're talking about, know about history, know about Romford, and in Andrew's case, know a bit about architecture and culture. And it seems to me the Philistines have taken over. Yeah. And they're not speaking to the right people. So I wouldn't pretend to be the expert on some of the things that Andrew talks about. So a proper administration would go to people like Andrew and say, look, we want you to be involved. Doesn't mean to say you take over, but we want you to be involved in part of the conversation. And it seems to me that people of ability don't get a look in because they're a threat to the administration and to the system. So more power to you, Andrew, and maybe in due course you'll have a lot more say.
Is that on the basis that there are people of talent within the administration? That's a bit of a stretch. That's a bit of a stretch, really, there, Graham.
Not the present one, no. I wasn't inferring that whatsoever. I think
I should add. I take no joy out of this, by the way. I mean, I think it's tragic. Actually, it's not. It's beyond party politics. This stuff. It's.
Yeah.
I respect conservatism, and I'm in my own party. I'm criticised being far too conservative for own good. But it is a tragedy that's being played out. The way they're captive to developers, and other Labour councillors are, Labour councils, Conservative councils. It's a sort of just a modern phenomena that
Andrew?
I was just briefly recalling some of the current leader of the council's commitments. I remember when he was elected in Highlands Ward, he was passionate about Highlands Ward, absolutely passionate. Said he couldn't do enough for them until the opportunity came to go to Squirrels Heath Ward, which of course, on the whole, he doesn't have to work to get elected there. He's passionate about them, absolutely passionate about them. And then he thought the opportunity came up in Dagenham and Rain. I understand the day before the general election, Rossendale's people were all clearing out Damien White's office, and of course he's going up to Parliament. Passionate about people in Dagenham and Rainham, so absolutely passionate about them. Unless, of course, a better opportunity comes up, someone else going to be passionate about them as well. So.
Well, we've heard some rumours about that as well.
yes, I think.
Anyhow, enough said.
Yeah. So moving on to the last item on the agenda, and that's questions. It's a questions and answers session from the press. So I believe, Ross, you've got a question.
Thank you, Julie. Julie, sorry. Having a lot of these conversations.
Can't hear you very well, Ross. Can you turn your speaker up or something, or move a bit nearer to your microphone, please?
Before whilst Ross is sorted out, I wonder, Andrew, with all the information you've got there, where the Conservatives have failed to preserve the sort of heritage and stuff in Romford Town, whether we could have that data, because I think that would be quite useful to put out to the public, that the Conservatives say they conserve things, but quite clearly they haven't. And the danger is that you're going to turn Romford into a parle it high, sell it cheap part of Havering, because you've only got to go from Ron Valley Way all the way almost to the town hall. It's just going to be Tower Block City right the way along.
Well, so if I get time, I can type up what I've said and maybe forward it.
Yeah, that would be great.
Send it through Graham. Yeah,
That'd be great, Andrew. That'd be great. I think Ross is now back with us.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys.
Yeah, no worries. That's better. We can hear you.
So this is open to everybody, but having been a part of these meetings since the Preserve's launch, it's becoming very clear that overdevelopment is a huge threat to Havering. Someone like to therefore, is it number one issue as far as you're concerned?
It will be the number one issue in May 2022.
Excellent.
Graham?
I'd like to add to that. I think obviously I do agree that it will be the major issue, and it should be the major issue, because we're not scaremongers. We're not inventing something for political benefit. This is a real problem, and this is a cross-party organisation, Preserve. It's open to anybody that's concerned about architectural beauty, concerned about housing numbers, concerned about infrastructure, or lack of infrastructure, quality of life, basically. That's how I see it. I think the biggest threat, I suppose you want to boil it down, it's the housing targets, and it's the council's acquiescence to it, and we've touched on why we think that is. I think it's going to lead to Havering to become that dormitory borough that the councils say they're worried about. They're actually going to oversee it turning into that, and without the infrastructure too. So if you want your infrastructure, you're going to have to travel into London. And I think that's the government's view. And that's fine, because they don't live in Havering and they don't care probably about Havering at all. Most people don't even know where Havering is, even now after so many years. But we do live in Havering, and we presumably want to protect our way of life. And I don't think the politicians, national politicians, care. I just wish we'd have a council that actually felt like we did and at least tried to push back. And it's not, as we heard from Ray and Andrew, it's not just about numbers, it's also about the quality. And to me that if you let your guard down, developers, businessmen will exploit it. And I think I admire what Ray did. The council should have done it, not Ray, but they didn't. I admire Andrew, but obviously nobody's listening to Andrew, with respect. Not this administration anyway. We're all listening because there's lots of common sense that's coming out from Andrew. It's what a council should be doing, in my opinion, is talking to people who've got expert knowledge and got passion. It seems to me, well, you know, the old phrase, lions led by donkeys, I think that's exactly what we've got in Havering, and we need to change it. So that, for me, that is the biggest threat.
Can I just...
Andrew? Sorry. Andrew?
So the Civic Society, we're not a party political organisation, so I'm sure that our members and supporters vote for the full, you know, those three established national parties and the Residents' Association in Havering.
Of course.
All four, I would say, we vote for, or people vote for it. We don't ask, but I should think there's Labour people there, there's Conservatives, there's RAs, there's Liberals, there's a lot, I should think. But in that everybody comes together and say, despite those things, we all want to live in a town which has an interesting environment, a good environment, where people sort of say, yeah, that's a good place to be. So I think that shows how important an issue it is, and it really does touch a nerve, and certainly we get quite a lot of feedback on social media about it. And we try, as Ray did in Hackton, not just to be against things, but to try and shape things for the better.
Yes.
Something's going to happen. And if you keep on saying no to something, that will guarantee you get something that no one's satisfied with, because all they do is take up the really horrid bits, but you're left with something so insipid that, you know, it's a bit like eating a fast food meal. It satisfies you for the moment, but later on you think, oh, I'm hungry again now, and that really wasn't all that good. So,
So, John, you wanted to come in?
I would just say, I think when Ray said it's the top issue, I do think it is, because this overdevelopment issue, it crystallises people's concerns about their own quality of life, the cuts to public services, the built environment, the remoteness of the council itself. They all these issues sort of bend through this question of overdevelopment. It's a good, and people feel it. It has a sort of visceral feel to it as well. And the feedback I get about it is, and it's beyond party politics actually. It is something that goes to the core of people's sense of wanting some control and a sense that their life will be quite more fulfilling in the future, and it sort of jeopardizes the life they wish to live for themselves and their families. So it won't go away. This is a very big, potent political issue, I think, over the next few years. It shouldn't have been, because this is not an anti-development issue. This is about good versus bad development.
Yeah.
And the way that we all talk from our various political positions, you can park the politics of this and just, you know, concentrate on the common good for everyone. But they seem to be trying to operate outside of those laws of, you know, what should be the basic laws of public policy locally.
Okay, and Ray, you wanted to add something?
Just going to say, obviously, Bellway was, you know, it's not absolutely perfect by any stretch of imagination. It's a lot better than what it could have been. So we don't always win, because in fact we had one recently next to Hornchurch train station, where the old Club 2004 was, and that got sold off, and they're putting 27 flats down there, which in itself would actually, you know, in terms of numbers, is not too bad, I guess. It tidies up that part of near the station, so there's some positives with it. And had they have decided to just keep it below, say, three stories, it wouldn't have been too bad. But of course, you've got 2 4-story blocks, which then just has that impact on people who back on to that. So sometimes I just think it's a little bit of the developer greed that, you know, their interest is making a profit. Yeah, they have shareholders, all that kind of stuff. And they're being encouraged, and the policies are allowing them to do that, where in fact they could have actually probably had very little objection to it if they'd kept it down to such a stage that they didn't have a negative impact on a lot of people who sort of back onto the development.
Okay, and Ross, have you got any other questions that you'd like to ask?
Oh, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Graham.
I'd just like to welcome Jodie to Preserve and thank you. Thank you for chairing. You can't escape now. And just to let you know, also there's a new Facebook group for Preserve. We'll be going up the weekend. And I'll
Okay.
leave that, everybody. It's for there to, all that's on there is the petition and the 2 conferences we've had up to now. Of that, there's nothing else on that. That's for everybody to contribute and debate. And I want, you know, we want it to be all parties, not one party. And Andrew quite rightly says he's involved in an organisation that almost certainly has people who vote all over the place. Doesn't mean to say that that should prevent them wanting to improve their quality of life or protect the quality of life, as John says. I think Preserve is absolutely necessary. I think we're unique, not necessarily objecting to overdevelopment, because I think the majority of people are doing. I think it's because we're cross-party. So, you know, we want to be cross-party. I believe in cooperation, consensus, if possible, obviously, because I think that's the right way, because I think any other way, it's winner takes all. And that's what you've got at the moment. You take it all, you do what you want, nothing can stop you. And if you fall into what I would regard as the sleepwalking into administration, anything can happen. I think we need, for development in Havering, it needs to be properly planned. Not like some Soviet style 5-year plan, but it needs to say, what do we want? What is acceptable? And I have to say, without going on, we were offered in the south, or people were off in the south, along New Road, a garden suburb. And my idea of a garden suburb is houses with gardens. I could be wrong. Some flats, because some people want to rent, and there is a numbers game. But what they promised, and in fact what was produced in the Bean Park framework, is massively different to what we've ended up with. And I blame our own council for not putting up and fighting and resisting developer greed. It didn't do it. It took ordinary members to do it, but the power of the ordinary public sometimes is not enough. You need the administration to support what the public want, and they didn't do it in the end. And they had lots of money and lots of meetings talking about a master plan for Rainham, and in the end that master plan wasn't adhered to, and all we got from officers is, oh, well, it's not statutory. I said, well, you should have made statutory in the local plan, but you didn't bother, did you? And I think here for Andrew in Romford, because the so-called master plan for Romford has never materialised. It's too late now because they're coming in.
It'll be published once it's all built, Graham.
There'll be nothing like it.
Good use of public funds, eh?
Absolutely, yes.
Ray, you wanted to come in?
Actually, no, they've preempted what I was going to say. I was going to talk about the Romford Master Plan. I think it's Romford Master Plan 2.0, because we did have a Romford Master Plan that Tom de Brashin, I think, put together, and nothing really ever materialised from that. So they're now on Master Plan 2.0. But none of us have seen it. I don't think it's been through Cabinet for formal approval yet, but they appear in the background to be working to some kind of plan. But
I wonder how much spent on it. I wonder how much has been spent on it.
Yeah.
Massive. And listen, we were joking, Andrew and I, but probably by the time it's published, there'll be no land left to develop. It'll all be taken over.
Well, just to give you a little bit of amusement, Andrew, a few years back, when Steve Kelly was around, we was listening to the plan about the redevelopment of Romford Market, and it was being done by an organisation, and the question was asked, oh, have you ever revamped a market before? No, we've not done it yet, but we've done all of these things, but we've never done a market before. It's like, what are we paying all this money for when you've never done one before?
Yeah,
I think it kind of typifies Havering in that regard.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Right.
Anybody else want to add anything?
No.
Just Merry Christmas to everybody.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.
To you.
And listen, we'll be back for the good fight in the new year.
Yeah.
I'll send out a notice to the Facebook group. If you can all encourage your friends and contacts to debate over development on it, it'll be fantastic.
Great.
It's almost you doing like that, Graham. If you do that again, it's like one of those old posters. Havering needs you.
It's you. Quick, get a screenshot.
Get a screenshot, Ross, and have a Havering needs you.
Yeah, indeed it does.
Thanks, Jodie. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thank
We're
you.
finished
Good
now.
night.
Later. Bye.
Thank you. Take care,
Good
everybody.
night.
Bye.
How far?
How do I leave?
Left.